r/Askreddit. What's your, fuck this, I quit, story? Was working at a restaurant in Mburo TN. Found a better job that actually gave me hours and went in to put my 2-week notice, was more like a few days due to timing of the new gig, and out of courtesy. I got a lecture about how I could never come back to the company since it wasn't a full 2 weeks. I then suggested politely that, that's great, let's say today is my last day then. Was such a relief. Summer job in a downtown, scuzzy part of the city, retail store. Repainting the wooden fence around the parking lot. The fence wood was a pattern so on an angle you could see through it. I was painting the one side and a guy walked up on the other side and started pissing on the other side. A stream of piss almost on my head. I yelled and said get the hell out of here. He continued to piss, and then dropped to a squat for a number 2. Got up. Packed up the paintbrush and paint. Went inside for a break. Boss said what are you doing in, the fence is not done. I said you don't pay me enough to get pissed on. And #X200B. And #X200B. Currently in the US military. Was back and forth about re-enlisting for another 4 years, have done 9, to this point. I have a 3-year-old daughter at home who I haven't seen in almost 2 years for more than 3 weeks. Was talking to an officer in my chain of command when I told him my thoughts. I had just received orders to remain overseas for an additional 2 years. His exact words were, "You've already missed 2 years of her life, you can afford to lose 2 more. I went to my command career counselor office that day and signed my intention to separate. Was at a job for 3 years, consistently in the top 3 of my department in terms of performance. Asked my supervisor repeatedly if I could be recommended for advancement/promotion and he always told me he was trying his best to get me new opportunities. Found out from a friend in a different department that I'd been considered a top candidate for 4 different promotions and each time my supervisor had blocked it. When I confronted him with this information he told me it was true and he did it because I could never find someone who does what you do without paying them a lot more. Internally said fuck this, I quit and found a new job within 3 months. Took all my PTO and on the day I came back I quit 2 hours into the day leaving him high and dry at a peak time. Fuck that dude. I got an interview offer from Vector Marketing, Cutco, as a teen. I went. It was a knife presentation. The presenter pulled me into the office for a short interview. Offered me the job on the spot. So you expect me to make appointments and travel? Correct, yes. And you want me to pay for my own knives, then tell me to sell them to my friends and family for commission? Correct, yes. I'll just get a real job. I worked at a movie theater for about 2 years when Star Wars 7 came out, which was hectic enough. But we also have to work holidays there. So, I was working on Christmas Day, when I was informed via radio that one of the theaters had a mess to be cleaned. When I arrived I found a pile of a grown man's shit on the ground. I put down my broom and walked out. I never even told them why I left, didn't feel like I needed to justify that. I worked for a company for over a year that was contracted to make deliveries for Amazon. The vans they equipped us with were terribly maintained, and fully unequipped to handle winter weather. I worked with the company through their first winter, which meant sliding all over the road when it was icy and getting stuck constantly every time we had snow. I never had a major accident, though I did have 2 or 3 close calls where only minor damage was incurred to the van. I decided to stick it out through the summer, when the weather was obviously much better. All summer long they promised us that new and better vans were coming. September rolls around, no vans. October, no vans. November, no vans. That month we got our first real snow. I got back from my route and immediately put in my notice. My boss told me they would be getting new vans by the end of the year. I told her that was nice and walked. Working at a tech support call center. I put in for a day off for my birthday a month in advance. Boss forgot to process my request and said I couldn't get it off when I asked about it closer to the date, saying something about time off requests being locked due to upcoming trainings. Those trainings were 2 weeks after my birthday. I was in the same position for 2 years and was actively looking at other positions within the same company. Bosses knew about it, it was just time for a change and to advance my career. Great opportunity came up and I was offered the position. However, my current leadership blocked me because I received a promotion 6 months prior. That promotion was literally an automatic email that said congrats, you are now level 2 instead of level 1 because I had met my sales attainment and completed all my yearly trainings. Literally an automated email stopped me from getting promoted, and bosses said I had to wait another 18 months. Left that company and went to a competitor doing the same thing for better pay and significantly more support. Worked at a big box office store. On my first week I got held up by a train and was 5 minutes late. By the time I had gotten there the manager had blown up my phone, 15 calls, but since it was winter and I had a big wool coat on plus a sweatshirt, I didn't feel my phone go off. I got a lecture when I walked in, and all morning he kept looking at me like I had killed his pet. About 2 hours later I got called into the office for a write-up. I went in and was very calm about the whole thing. He kept saying I should show more remorse. I told him if 5 minutes was getting me a write-up and a lecture, plus being told I obviously don't care since I'm not remorseful enough, he could keep the job. I interviewed for a corporate accounting role because public accounting was much less pay, and a lot more hours. Was told in the interview that it was show up between 8 to 9, leave between 4 to 5. There'd be no more working late nights, or having to work on weekends, which was great. I took the job, and within 2 months realized they were lying through their teeth. First off, there was absolutely no training on their processes. I was given enough work for 3 people, with no direction on how to do it. My manager was so scatterbrained, he could never give me any help when I asked. No one talked for 8 hours a day, and it was just an unbelievably bad work culture. I'd get to work usually at 8:30, and leave at 4:30 while eating lunch at my desk. I came in one day and was told, since you're leaving so early, I can only hope you're working from home. Then the next week, we're told we have to come in for a full day Saturday because we had New Year's Day off that Monday. My final straw was when I left at 2:30 one day for a doctor's appointment. When I came in the next day, my manager pulled me into a room and said that I didn't have enough accrued PTO to do that, and he was going to dock my pay, in a salaried position. Went in the next day, told him it wasn't working out and put my 2 weeks in. On my last day, he told me I could leave at 11:30, so I did. When I got my final paycheck, he docked my pay for the remainder of that day. Luckily, the recruiter who got me the job followed up to ask what happened, and I was completely open and honest with her. Apparently, that manager has a very high turnover rate for the position I was in, and the recruiter told me that the CFO is looking into replacing him. Worked in a Greek restaurant. Owners spoke very little English. Once I was making that tzatziki and the owner started talking to his wife behind me in Greek. Then his daughter joined in. Eventually the owner got my attention and started off talking to me in Greek with his daughter translating. It gradually went from talking to yelling. Both of them. One in Greek, the other in English about how I'm fucking up the tzatziki. This went on for about 5 minutes. I'm just standing there listening to this. Not being able to get a word in until I just snapped. Shut the fuck up. They surprising stopped. Looking at me like I just killed their goldfish. Yeah, I quit. And I just walked out. The chef followed. We went to a local bar and drank and talked about how fucking nuts they were. I was a new sous chef at a country club. Chef wouldn't let anyone but himself do the ordering. His ordering method was to go over a sheet of paper hanging on the line where people wrote down what we were out of. Not what we were nearly out of, but what we were completely out of. Anytime I'd try to add items that we were close to out of on, he'd lose his shit. We were constantly out of things. One day, we had a huge Easter breakfast event. Dipshit chef didn't order near enough eggs and we were out of all sorts of other random items. I was out front making omelets for members. Ran out of eggs and stood around for 15 minutes waiting for more while the members became increasingly frustrated then angry. Went to the back to see chef yucking it up with the manager. Handed him my apron and told him to pound sand. Was at that job for less than 2 weeks. Many years ago I worked at a place called Atomic Burrito. I only worked there for 4 days. I was washing dishes and the manager walked by and started yelling at me for using soap. He said soap cost money and we were just putting the same food back in the pans anyways. I quit right there. Nope, the frick right out the door. Waitressing at a small cafe, owner was also the manager/cook. One day, we were in the weeds, getting thrown around left and right, and finally when it slows down, the other line cook messed up. So the owner, who already had several screaming meltdowns, picks up a plate and throws it right at the server alley. It broke on the wall near my head. So I took off my apron and waddled my pregnant ass on home. Fuck that. It closed a few weeks ago, which wasn't surprising. I was denied a food break after working for close to 10 hours straight. My wife has one. Her boss suddenly became obsessed with bringing in as many new people as possible. Oddly, he seemed to forget about retaining his current workers. Many, like my wife, were very experienced at this point. You would think that they'd be considered the most valuable employees of the group. My wife had settled into a nice MF schedule, with good hours, 10 to 5. Suddenly, her boss pulls her in for a meeting and says most of the new employees can't work nights or weekends due to personal conflicts. I'll need you to switch to a 1 to 9 schedule and work Saturdays. My wife was caught off guard and responded, "When you hired me, I told you that I had conflicts in the evenings and weekends, and that I would be able to work within that schedule." The boss got all serious and said, "Listen, I think I've been more than generous and accommodating of your schedule needs. I think it's time for you to show us some of that same flexibility." My wife started crying immediately and stormed back to her desk. She called me and said that she thought she needed to quit, but wanted to make sure she wasn't crazy. After listening to what happened, I said that boss could go to hell and she should never look back. She took her free water bottle and never returned. First job, working at a little barbecue place with a drive-through. My day off. Manager calls me at 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before we open, saying she doesn't feel good and needs me to open. I rush in and end up working all day. 5 p.m. rolls around, manager comes in with the owner of the business, who she's dating. They were at the fair all day and completely forgot they lied to me about her being sick. I bite my tongue and ask if I can go home. They say no and keep me until close, 9 p.m. At 9 p.m. I took my shirt off, handed them my keys, and said, "Today was my last day," as I walked out the door shirtless. Best part, when I got home my dad was pissed that I quit my job. I told him what they did and said I wasn't making enough money. He looked at my pay stubs and saw they hadn't been paying me overtime the entire time I worked there. He made me go back in and demand my overtime pay. When I came in with the pay stubs, the manager started crying and gave me cash out of the register to cover my overtime and then some. They called me the next day making sure I wasn't going to report them to the BBB. I didn't, but my dad did. Dude told me I couldn't work unless I shaved. Okay, whatever. Sent me home with the lightest 5 o'clock shadow and told me to come back shaven. I didn't come back. Arrived at the bar to work my shift only to discover that the owners had sacked my manager because there was, in their view, too much wastage. At the time, he was recovering from major surgery on his arm. He had 3 young children and an 8 months pregnant wife. They thought they were losing money because not every drop of beer poured went into somebody's drink, which is just a fact of life in a bar, and not because their idle Torag son/brother, father/son owner duo, kept coming in with his mates and demanding we give them drinks they didn't have to pay for. Quit on the spot, went to the manager's son's christening a while later. A year or 2 after that was told the bailiffs had come to visit the bar and left with quite a lot of furniture. Couldn't have happened to bigger cunts. I was interviewing for a manager's job and got it. There was a woman interviewing for the same job and she was hired as an assistant manager under me. Obviously, she didn't like me. She was constantly trying to undermine me and I was planning on having her moved to another location or just fire her. My VP then hired her husband as my district manager. After about a month of constant backstabbing, I was at a manager's meeting. Both the VP, the husband/district manager and about a dozen location managers were all there. District manager starts to lay into me while I'm the guy with the best numbers in the bunch. I stood up and told the VP I couldn't believe how he would make a hiring decision like he did with the husband that was so stupid and unethical. I told the husband/district manager that he didn't know his head from his ass and walked out of the room. The location I managed closed about a year later, and while I was happy that the wife/husband team couldn't achieve the success I did there, I felt bad for the employees there. They were good, hard-working people that were suddenly out of a job because of circumstances they had no control over. And it didn't have to be that way. So I was a manager, and the company I worked for was shit about raises. I made it my mission to get my staff fair raises each year. The first year, I took a hit on my raise so my staff could get fair raises. Found out instead of the 3% ownership agreed to, they only got 1%. The second year, I went full force and asked for a raise to compensate for the previous year and also fair for the current year, along with the same for my staff. Ownership reluctantly agreed. We had increased overall revenue by a whopping 24%, the best the company had ever seen. I let each of my team know what their raise would be in their performance review. Ownership then went behind my back and told each member of my staff that I lied to them, and that they never agreed to it, and that on top of not giving them a fair and well-deserved raise, they were removing all bonuses. I told the ownership what's what, apologized to my staff, and accepted a position with a huge raise, great bonus package, and wonderful benefits. Left them behind, and last I heard they are suffering bad. Hemorrhaging accounts that I worked hard on, serves them right. Working in a fast food restaurant, 3 people working. In the middle of the kitchen floor, as in sitting on the floor, of the tiny kitchen, was the 55-year-old owner, playing Candy Crush on full volume. This went on for 30 minutes while everyone is running around him. At the end of the shift, the tip jar mysteriously was empty. Those 3 didn't come back next day. I had a manager who just didn't like me. I don't know why, it happens. But she couldn't keep it professional, and acted as if every mistake I had made on purpose, just to fuck with her. Meanwhile everyone else told me that they were super happy with me, and I was a great worker. So she had worked that Saturday, and when I turned on my PC that Monday morning I had about 10 emails from her, all with screenshots and rude remarks like, "Why is it so hard for you to follow the rules?" and "How did you not know this?" While she was the one that trained me. Fuck that shit, I'm worth way more than that. I was 20 and had been working in a call center for just over a year. I was promoted to an assistant manager with a new compensation structure that was identical to the other assistant manager. Basically you got your wage, a very small percent of the total office revenue, and then 10% of your own revenue from when you worked on the phone. My immediate manager and office supervisor gave me this without confirming it with the regional manager who was on a 2-month vacation in the DR. When I got my first check after being promoted there was no bonus, I was told it would be corrected soon. When I got my second check after being promoted there was no bonus, I was told it would be corrected soon. When I got my third check after being promoted there was no bonus and I was told we had to wait for the regional manager to come back and authorize it. I was being paid weekly and worked another 4 weeks under the premise that I would get a lump sum when the regional manager returned. The problem was that I sold significantly more than the other office manager. The back pay had grown to such a large amount that when the regional manager did return he questioned why the office manager had given me this structure as he considered it to be too much money. On my next check there was no lump sum and I was told that they were figuring out a new structure. My following shift I stayed home and got a frantic call from the office manager asking me why I wasn't at work. I told him I couldn't afford to go to work. He said, "Why can't you afford it?" "Because I have been getting ripped off for 2 months. Call me back when you have my money or don't call me at all." Never did get paid.